met the first day as Foreign Minister of the Republic of the Marshall Islands to give his summary of what has happened.
Thank you, Professor Gerard, and again, good afternoon to all of you. And again, thank you all for coming to the last day of this important conference. Climate change, as you know, poses an indisputable threat to security, sustainability, and survivability of small island developing states. For the Marshall Islands, climate change is already posing a threat to our sustainable development, but also poses long-term risk to the fundamental aspects of our statehood. Considerations of intergenerational equity carry a moral and legal duty to minimize those risks and to address them going forward, taking into account the need to ensure the continuity of traditional cultures and communities and respecting unique connections to the land and natural resources. Columbia University's Earth Institute estimates that climate change will produce average sea level rise of at least 1, perhaps 2 meters by 2100. With Pacific Island states, including the Marshall Islands, likely to experience higher than average increases. Ocean acidification levels will threaten, if not halt, growth of corals, a particular concern for coral atolls and nations. These are potent and existential threats to life in the Marshall Islands. Priority on immediate action is essential to curb these threats. Urgent and dramatic cuts in global emissions are required, and all countries must play their part. Those historically responsible must take the lead. But large and rapidly emerging developing countries need to curb their emission trajectories and decouple growth from carbon. Only with ambitious leadership from the world's largest emitters can the world avoid the most dangerous of climate change impacts. At the same time, national adaptation efforts must be stepped up. They are currently inadequate to stave off the worst effects. Even as capacity is enhanced, efforts need to be sharply upscaled and linked to a present jumble ranch of international finance options. We must do more than call attention to the most serious long-term risk. These risks are confronting but must be tackled head-on. First, the long-term risk and possible responses must be factored into adaptation strategies, not only over the next decade, but looking forward to the end of the century. Traditional adaptation measures could ultimately be limited in their ability to address the range of future impacts and risk. Donor and externally funded projects, in particular infrastructure, must be locally driven and climate-proofed. Further scientific work and data collection should inform both vulnerable assessment and national planning. Deep and complex changes may be posed to our Marshallese communities, and we must rise to the challenges building on our traditional cultures. Second, despite the best of adaptation efforts, the intensifying impacts of climate change are likely to drive significant population displacement. For the Marshall Islands, where population displacement may be both internal and external, the international system is largely unprepared. criteria for drawing distinctions between climate-driven displacement and broader socio-environmental factors would be useful, but difficult to define. A new international agreement is one way to address the new phenomena of climate displacement, but would take time to initiate and conclude, particularly given national sensitivities around international migration. Regional and bilateral engagement might prove more fruitful in the short term, particularly if focused on matching likely source and destination states. These discussions must canvass a range of difficult issues and interlinkages, including statehood, citizenship, dignity, culture, and human security. There are clear human rights implications and social costs which have yet fully factored in. This is the human face of the climate crisis. Third, climate-driven threats to statehood may emerge gradually, but cannot be ignored. The criteria for statehood are not static, nor inflexible. In all circumstances, equity and moral responsibility demands that the sovereign entity and its related characteristics be maintained, even in the absence of permanently habitable territory. Recognition of a state cannot be compromised by a phenomena caused by others. Our sovereignty must be our own. Further, maintenance of the state also implies maintenance of all that comes with it. This includes sovereign rights relating to the natural resources, maritime zones and jurisdictional rights, and obligations that attach to the state. Maritime rights may be secured for the long term through proactive submission of maritime zone baselines and common understanding of their treatment by state parties to the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Finally, we need to clarify legal responsibility for the harm caused by the impact of climate change. Without immediate action to address dangerous climate change, obligations of due diligence to prevent harm to other countries and areas beyond national jurisdiction will be breached, and if they have not been already. It is a basic principle of law that where there is a wrong, there must be a remedy. While some further and collaborative analysis is required, possible avenues for international legal action will need to be considered. As a first step, advisory opinions may help to clarify the relevant legal principles and relevant thresholds of harm. But any such move should not be considered lightly and must be pursued on its merits. So what is the way forward? This conference has been a unique and creative experience, a creative exchange on complex issues. The focus and engagement of the international academic community has been valuable in exploring innovative avenues for addressing these challenges and to assist us in our efforts to craft and refine a menu of legal and political options to address the long-term risk. This collaborative process should continue and intensify. The international community has only started to scratch the surface on these deep and complex issues, and no doubt new issues will emerge. The Marshall Islands is determined to hold and define its own future, leveraging the leadership and solidarity of our small island states, colleagues, and the broader international community. To take these issues forward, President Zetkea has proposed a ministerial meeting of a new grouping in the margins of the UN General Assembly this September, the Forum of Atoll Nations. To prepare We will first consult with our closest neighbors in the Micronesia region and other atoll island countries and seek the input of our partners in the Pacific region and beyond. In that regard, the Marshall Islands calls on the Alliance of Small Island States, or AOSIS, to engage with these issues pragmatically and wholeheartedly. We need and expect solidarity from our peers, and we will continue to demonstrate leadership and flexibility in pursuing these discussions. We need to work together if we are to confront and overcome the most difficult challenge of all, the threat to the survival of our nation. Again, let me take this opportunity to thank all of you for your participation for the last 3 days. It has been a very gratifying last 3 days for me and the President and the delegate and his delegation from the Marshall Islands to have met with so many of you, scholars, intellectuals, in this very room for the last 3 days. Your input and your valuable papers, which were presented throughout the last 3 days, are very important and have given us, through the last 3 days, an opportunity to view the world in a different perspective. A world that we believe cares so much about itself that it would help itself, leverage itself from the prediction and doom of those who believe that there is no recourse. I think there is recourse. And that recourse is in the heart of every one of you. So when I started 3 days ago, I cited a quote from the bumper sticker that goes out in some of the cars that drive around the road in the Marshall Islands. I would like to conclude by reciting those words in the bumper sticker, which says, to believe is to care, and to care is to do. You have been here for the last 3 days because you believe. You believe that there's something wrong with our climate. And because you believe that, you care to take your time and energy to write paper, research, and to come here and participate in this conference. And because you care, you wanted to do something about it. And you have done it. You have done it by your participation. So we look forward to working with you and collaborate with you so that we can bring the human face to this issue. And along with the bear, have our human face next to the bear. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. We've been joined up front by Ambassador Jarmin Vineman, who is the permanent representative of Finland to the United Nations, and I'd like to invite Ambassador Vineman to come up and address us.
Thank you very much. Honorable Minister, Professor Sherrod, Ambassador Muller, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, let me start by thanking the government and permanent mission of Marshall Islands for organizing, and Columbia Law School for organizing this 3-day conference. The past 3 days certainly have offered eye-opening presentations and even provocative approaches to a very serious topic. I haven't been able personally to be here during the 3 days, but I have had colleagues from the mission here, and they certainly said that this has been very, very inspiring and also very eye-opening on this subject. The Honourable Minister John Silk said on Monday, 20 years ago it did not seem to be necessary to talk about island nations being submerged. To many it sounded like science fiction. And here we are today discussing the same topic with a totally different tone and soberness. It is clear that the seminar like this will lead to a better understanding about the situation, the very grave situation where we are, also a better understanding what needs to be done. And I sincerely hope that the better understanding will also lead to more urgent action, because understanding without action is not going to be enough. Climate change has very different implications for different parts of the world, and certainly, for example, compared with Pacific Islands and my own country, Finland. My country, which is very far in the north, may not be hit hardest, but also we see the changing weather patterns and extreme weather phenomena more and more often. Challenges may be different in the north, but we share only one planet. All of us need to work hard. We need to work hard on different levels, and there is plenty to do for each of us and every one of us. This is a global challenge, and it requires global solutions. The fact that some states are in danger of geographically disappearing is shocking. This is everybody's challenge and problem. Nobody should close his or her eyes in front of this challenge. It is obvious that in order to effectively tackle the challenges, we need to adopt a comprehensive approach to make progress at several levels simultaneously. First of all, it is clear that we need to have effective adaptation. The most vulnerable countries should be strongly supported in their efforts to adapt to the changes we are facing. Secondly, adaptation sounds clean and very technical and does not reveal all. We do need to help the island nations to survive and preserve their culture. There may be good definitions what makes a state, but we also have to keep in mind the human approach. There has been hundreds and thousands of years of history and culture on these islands. The world loses if these disappear. And last but not least, we do need to reduce emissions. It would be important that all countries implement the emissions reduction targets and actions that they have pledged in the climate negotiations. And my country certainly hopes and works for that the outcome of Cancun will be followed further by concrete steps forward in Durban. We all see that it's not going to be an easy road. We see that there isn't the feeling of and sense of urgency in these negotiations, and certainly the sense of urgency have to be brought back to these negotiations. My country, Finland, may not have the same challenges as the small island states, but we share the same concerns. That is why we are supporting efforts to strengthen the voice of the Alliance of Small Island States and the Marshall Islands in the international negotiations on climate change. And in addition, we continue to support capacity development of the Pacific Small Island developing states in the area of climate change by funding a work of legal advisor on climate change-related issues here in New York. To conclude, we hope that this discussion and debate continues lively and small island states truly have their voice heard. We have had debates, discussions, for example, also in our mission on the topic of climate change and security. And we know that this issue is going to be on the Security Council's agenda in July. To me, it is evident that there's a clear connection between climate change and international peace and security. It is obvious that the Security Council needs to recognize these relations in clear terms in July. And I hope and I wish that this conference and its outcome also will contribute to this end. As I said, we have had discussions and debates on the topic, but these should also lead to action. So let us change the grim science into a success story of solidarity, cooperation, and innovation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I'd like to share just a few of my own takeaways from the discussion of the last 3 days in terms of what the understandings that I've reached, and maybe they're wrong, but my general sense first is very clearly the seas are rising, and at some point in time, many of the atolls and islands that we've been talking about will eventually be in great danger of submersion unless the coral reefs are able to rise at the requisite rate, which sounds greatly imperiled as a result of the combination of warmer seas and ocean acidification. But the point of submersion appears to be many decades, possibly centuries ahead for almost all places. The greatest risk, and it is a very considerable risk, is of extreme events, that the combination of the ordinary tidal range and the increase of in sea levels and various kinds of extreme weather events do pose a real peril to the populations of some of the islands, and predicting when those will become a truly perilous problem is very difficult, and that sudden events can happen with essentially no notice and are really a danger. It's also, and so that protective measures, emergency plans, lots of other different kinds of measures need to be taken very soon, because this kind of extreme event can happen at any time. It also became clear that the peril to statelessness, the peril to statehood is not imminent, that quite some time will elapse before a country is truly in danger of losing its statehood. And similarly, the issue of maritime rights, the exclusive economic zone and so forth, that is not an imminent threat. And there are ways to extend that through the filing of maps and various other methods. We've talked about a number of physical methods that can be used there. But in any event, that too is tied to the issue of statehood, that it wouldn't be a disembodied right. There was certainly a consensus that the mitigation measures being taken by the developed countries and the rapidly developing countries of the world are nowhere near adequate. They are orders of magnitude below what they would be, what would be needed in order to achieve the kinds of reductions we need to remove the threat to the endangered nations. And there's a tremendous amount of frustration at the negotiating process, the political processes, everything else that is happening as a result. One consequence of that is that there's very considerable interest in exploration of litigation options. Quite a few different kinds of theories for litigation options have been discussed in the course of the 3 days. Some of them relate to using procedures under existing agreements, such as the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the United Nations Conference on Law of the Sea, various other international agreements, under human rights theories, under the domestic laws of some of the major emitting states. A number of other theories have been put forward. We've heard a number of times the saying, where there is a wrong, there must be a remedy, and that is certainly an old canon of the law, but it does not necessarily mean that where there is a wrong, there must be a remedy in court. That the remedies that are granted are sometimes remedies that must be granted by the national legislatures or other bodies. But sometimes remedies appear that judicial remedies in surprising sources based on surprising theories, so that that kind of thing may well be pursued to good effect. Some of the good effect that even in the absence of a favorable judicial outcome is through the narrative function, through the telling of the story, through the marshaling of the evidence, through the mustering of experts and so forth, is adding to the likelihood that a political solution will be achieved, and also influencing the sources and distribution, perhaps, of adaptation funding. We had a lot of discussion about the issues of migration and resettlement. It became very clear that it is far from one size fits all, that there are many, many different scenarios of where people come from, why they go, the pace at which they move, the reasons that they want to move, where they want to go, what they want to do when they get there, that it's a very broad array of scenarios that are present. There was not consensus on whether there is a need for a new international convention on migration, but clearly it's an issue that requires a great deal of ongoing attention, and it was also very clear that short of international agreements, bilateral agreements do and are likely to continue to play a very central role in the resolution of the problems faced by particular populations. There are, it turns out, quite a few precedents for communities that move from one place to another. No precedents for entire states that move for environmental reasons, but there are precedents that are useful both legally and in terms of the economic and social and other issues that arise when these kinds of situations present themselves. It was also very clear that domestic laws are quite important on a variety of different counts, that for the island nations, the domestic laws play an important role in adaptation and framing the modes of adaptation, the modes of continuing the economic activity and social activity in the areas. Clearly on the mitigation side they are essential. And at the receiving countries, the countries that would receive the displaced people, there are a lot of open issues on the nature of domestic laws with respect to citizenship, the right to stay, the legal rights that the people would have, their entitlement to social services and benefits. All of these are very difficult issues. So we've talked about a broad array of legal issues, and what I'd like to do now is just spend a few minutes talking about and asking for your input right now or afterwards on next steps, on things that we can do to pursue the discussions and follow up from the discussions that we've had over the last 3 days. First, some of the things that we have been planning to do all along and clearly are going to continue to do will be probably next week posting on our website the videos of these entire proceedings. We are at work on doing a book of proceedings of selected papers from the conference. To the extent that we have permission from the authors, we'd like to post the slideshows, the PowerPoints that have been presented, and we'd also like to post the papers and the posters, although we realize that some of them are in a preliminary stage, but it'll be up to the authors whether to allow us to do that, but we would like to make all of that information available to the extent that we're allowed to. We'll be posting detailed notes summarizing all the discussions that took place. Various other papers that emerged from this we'll be posting on our website. Some time ago we posted a a bibliography on issues relating to statehood, statelessness, various of the other issues that have been talked about here, and we have from time to time expanded that. And I would invite anyone who has additional bibliographic references that they think ought to be on the list to send them to us so that we can have the bibliography as comprehensive as possible. We would also be happy to post working papers that people prepare on these issues. The website of the Center for Climate Change Law already has a great deal of useful reference material on lots of different aspects of climate change law. It's one of our missions to do that. And if there are additional materials that people think would be helpful to disseminate in that fashion, please let us know and we can take a look at it. Some thoughts that have been put forward, but we haven't decided whether or not to pursue them, and I'd be interested in reactions from many of you on whether to do this, would be to, on our website, create an online forum for discussion, for online discussion of some of these issues. Perhaps do periodic teleconferences or webinars or some other kind of electronic way for it at very low carbon cost, communicating on a live basis on some of these issues and otherwise using the web for that purpose. There have been discussions about organizing selected meetings perhaps before the UN Security Council meeting that we've talked about and some other events. I think that there are going to be continued discussions on various and explorations of various of the litigation options that have been discussed, and that will be different people wearing a variety of different hats. There may be an effort to develop a position paper that sort of sets forth the substantive conclusions here, lays out what we know, what we don't know, what further work would be necessary in order to achieve answers to some of the legal questions that were discussed. And there's been some discussion of whether it would be useful to create a set of international displacement guidelines along the lines of the internal displacement guidelines that have been created some time ago. So this is just a listing of some of the things that we've talked about as follow-up items, and let me now ask whether there are either reactions to any of the things that I've mentioned or additional thoughts on follow-up items that would be constructive.
Thank you very much.
Stuart.
First of all, I'd like to thank our friend. Oh, yes.
Microphone.
Thank you, Professor, Minister, Ambassador. First, I'd like to thank our friend, the Ambassador of Finland, for so strongly affirming the essential intellectual pillar of the upcoming debate at the Security Council, that security and climate change are inextricably linked. And as clear and concise and as supportive as his comments are, I can assure you that not all of the countries in the world are as forthcoming about this as our friend from Finland. So this means to me that you're undertaking to create some kind of a intellectual center which might be supportive of us as we go through this upcoming critical debate at the Security Council on the security implications of climate change would be very, very helpful, I think, to all of us as we move forward. So I would endorse that and let everyone know that the more attention that can be paid to this Security Council debate, the better, I think, for all of us. It was not easy for us to get to this point. It's not going to be very easy to get a good outcome from that Security Council resolution. The last time that this was considered by the Security Council, nothing happened after the debate. So our job is to try and get a good outcome, and I think any help that you can give us in that regard would be extremely well received. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Additional thoughts on next steps? Ambassador.
Let me just add a few words. I know that the Minister and Professor Gerard have eloquently summarize the results of the deliberations of the last 3 days. And we certainly look forward to the written outcome and the related activities that would come with it. I think we still have a lot of work to be done. For me personally, I'm extremely happy and pleased that what we started out to do 1 year ago, which was to bring back the urgency and the excitement to the discussion of the devastating effects of climate change. I think we have achieved it in 3 days. So even if nothing else came out, I'm extremely pleased that just the level of interchange of ideas and the levels of the panelists who made presentations, I think will really help keep this momentum going. I think from here on, I think what we need to do is we need to continue to mobilize public opinion, either through the internet or in any other avenue, through the UN, GA. I think we need to get the world opinion and the political will to keep this going. As I said, there is so much work to be done. And so it's only in the effort that we get people, the public, to stand behind us that we can achieve more. And so I think it is appropriate at this time for me to say that how pleased I was and am to have been working with Professor Gerard. I want to say thank you for all your diligence and all the good work that you have done, including your support team, Greg and all the students of the Environment Center. They have done a really excellent job. I just want you to know, if it was not for you folks, we would not be here and the conference would not be as successful. So thank you all, and I will give it back to the audience. We have a number of our ambassadors from to the United Nations. I'm sure they would want to weigh in on any of these final comments and thoughts. So, and of course, anyone else. Thank you.
And while they're coming up, I'd like to also express my gratitude to Caleb Christopher of the Consulate of the Marshall Islands for all the wonderful work over more than a year.
Just some thoughts at the final of these 3 days. Thank you very much, Professor Gerard. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Minister of Marshall Islands, and my dear colleague here. Thank you, Caleb. Thank you, the team of Professor Gerard. It was the first time I was coming to Columbia University. I was amazed to discover your university and the gold that is you of this university, and I felt just like when I was student some years ago. You know, when we have discussed all this, when we try to understand better our own situation, and as we see so many people coming from so many horizons and countries, I think that we could say that we feel like we are all brothers. And brothers in fighting the extreme weathers, the challenge, in confronting the challenge of climate change, brothers in resilience, brothers in trying to find solutions. And I feel like you are my family. So we are family, and we have to find the way to give, to see the way forward. And I think what you said, Professor, is very useful to continue through the modern mechanism to find and to exchange ideas and to find the ingredients for our struggle. And I think that it is very useful to have this kind of exchange between those who are studying the situation, those who are confronted by the situation, and those who are trying to put this situation at the top of the agenda of the UN. It is very useful. And as I said, you are my family. You can count on me, Mr. President, Mr. Minister, transmit it to the President. And hopefully we can continue to struggle all together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I, of course, share all the views that my colleagues have stated. I'm from the Permanent Mission of Belize. Thank you to the Minister, thank you to the Ambassador Muller, thank you to the PR of Finland, and thank you, of course, to Columbia Law. This discussion has to happen at the United Nations. We need to pollinate the politicians, the ideas that they have to begin thinking about what Ambassador Muller referred to, the urgency of crafting a response to what many of the island states have. So in that regard, I would almost want to suggest that, you know, we have international years for many issues, forests, we've had for reef, we could have for the islands. We need to think about creative ways of maintaining a momentum of the discussion that has been generated here. And so Belize would, of course, pledge its support moving forward. We think your suggestions of having a forum online is a good one, but we need to bring it into the UN, and there are avenues to do that. Not only UN New York, but there are other fora to look to. UNESCO, you could think of many other areas, even in the international law symposiums that do occur. So I think we just need to think creatively and look towards these other avenues to bring these ideas forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I just want to share a few thoughts on this final moment. Indeed, was a very thought-provoking conference all throughout the days. First of all, I want to acknowledge and give thanks to all the participants, especially the ambassadors, from the UN. This really has put up a high-level conference. We're talking globally here. We're so happy to hear about the Security Council will be taking up this issue, as well as a ministers' meeting in September at the UNGA. But what I like to say is that everybody's been saying this, we need to coordinate, we need to share solidarity. We welcome the online networking. It's also good to know that University of South Wales will be hosting a similar conference. They're going to be asking the same questions, and we look forward to those outcomes of the meeting. We can combine them. And also we are doing our regional adaptation mitigation and national adaptation mitigations. All these we need to share. And I think the key thing here is we need to coordinate all these efforts that we are doing, including what they're doing in Tuvalu, Bangladesh, everywhere. So again, once again, I'm really happy to be here. And I want to thank Minister Selk and Ambassador Muller. They're on the executive side of Parliament, and I'm on the minority side. But it shows that this is a bipartisan thing. There's no political issue in climate change. Thank you.
Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Jinjin Chen, and I'm a student from Sciences Po Paris, one of the sister university of Columbia University, and I'm also doing my internship at UN DESA, Small Island Developing State Unit. My supervisor, Ms. Morita Laurel, sent me here to cover the discussion and report to her. And I want to congratulate and very appreciate the very good quality of the discussion, which can help me better understand the issues, and also I can have very concrete content to report back to my supervisor. And especially not just we are not just discuss the human rights, the legal framework, and also discuss the issue in technical level, for example, the insurance and the very innovative financing mechanisms for small island countries. So thank you very much, and I learned a lot from here, and it will be a wonderful memory of my internship at the UN DESA. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I am from the Permanent Mission of Maldives. I wanted to, first of all, congratulate you on organizing such a successful conference. And I agree with the ambassador from Belize that we need to take this discussion to United Nations. We need to engage at the highest political level on such a discussion, because the urgency with which we need to attend to this issue cannot be understated. Like the ambassador from Cape Verde also said, we have scholars who are studying the issue, and we also have people from small island states who are living the issue right now, and we have the engagement of our friends and partners at United States who are making policies. So this is a very thought-provoking and an important discussion that needs to go back to United Nations, and we need to keep momentum on this discussion. So I just wanted to congratulate you again, Professor Gerard, for organizing such a successful conference along with the Marshall Islands, and wanted to add our voice to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me stand up so I can see people. Yes.
Hi, I'm Laurie Johnston with Southeast Indigenous Peoples Center, and I wanted to say thank you to the Marshall Islands for bringing people together to address the legal issues of climate change. The Marshall Islands is a great model of responsible governance that many UN members could learn from. And thank you also to Finland, who, unlike other UN members who kill indigenous leaders for suggesting that they be allowed to make and implement decisions, Finland actually encourages the Sami Parliament in environmental and climate change decisions. So thank you all, both Marshall Islands and Finland, for modeling good governance. That gives us all hope. If the world is going to reduce carbon emissions and effectively adapt to climate changes, all the world's governments have to be involved in the dialogue and the solutions to this global climate change problem. So indigenous peoples worldwide have to be decolonized also, like many of the islands in the Pacific, so that we can put our values into practice and enforce our ancient laws respecting the water and the wind and the land. So how can we use legal tools to facilitate indigenous peoples' environmental sovereignty so our good governmental traditions can also effectively mitigate and adapt to climate change? And how can the legal community address climate refugees of indigenous countries whose sovereignty the UN does not yet recognize as decolonized countries? And how can we put legal mechanisms into place now so that we can avoid and mitigate the violence that all climate change refugees are going to face as resources grow scarce?
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shakil Kazmi, and I'm from Pace Law School, New York. First of all, I will congratulate Columbia University and, of course, Marshall Islands government, and more specifically Professor Gerard and Ambassador Mueller for organizing such a wonderful conference. It's very informative, inspiring, and very meaningful. I'm doing research at Pace at the same topic for the last 3 years, but I can easily say that these 3 days of attending this conference, of course, 8 hours a day equals to my 3 years research sitting in the library. Having said so, we talked a lot about displacement, and from all this discussion from panelists and question answers, I see only two classes of displaced people. One internally displaced, IDPs, and other one externally displaced, which, of course, I will not go in discussion. They are migrant, are refugees. And then we discuss several options and solutions how to protect them. And again, I will not go in detail of that one. But while sitting here today, from some statements from Marshall Islands representatives, I realized that some people, they will refuse to move, rather whatever unknown reason. Again, perhaps this is not the right time to discuss about the reasons. And if they refuse or if they choose to stay there, and being a law student, I understand that's the duty of a national government to protect them. But in case if national government is unable to protect them, there is no national government, then how we will protect them? Do they deserve any consideration? Should we do something? Because apparently all these scenarios which we discussed, I don't see, they don't fit in the IDP's definition, and they don't fit in the migrant or refugees definition as well, because they are not displaced, they are still living there. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. V.D. Sharma. I am from the Permanent Mission of India. First of all, I am really thankful to the organizers of this event. The theme chosen is, of course, of utmost urgency. I fully agree with the esteemed permanent representative of Finland that the climate change has impact on the whole world, maybe in different way in different parts of the world. So although the small islands are the worst hit, but the whole world is facing the challenge and would be facing the challenges. We have to think about it and to find solutions. The international law existing at this point of time has several gaps, and we people have discussed, in fact, in last 3 days, the existing international law of the Sea Convention, CBD, and other instruments. They don't address the all issues, and in fact the debate regarding the gaps between CVD and law of the sea concerning the rights on the genetic resources in the area beyond the national jurisdiction is already going on. And the matter is coming up before the Security Council is of very importance. In fact, the international community at the highest level has to take care of this issue. This kind of events, seminars are very important really, and the people would be guided and the voice will be heard. I am fully hopeful of that. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I am Mustafa Nasser from Bangladesh. First of all, I'd like to thank Professor Michael Gerard and Gregory for inviting me, and Columbia Law School for inviting me to this conference. In line with my friends from Pace Law School, I'd like to say, actually, my PhD thesis on climate change displacement focusing on Bangladesh, so I am immensely benefited and enriched with the discussion and exchange of views with participants. And the most unique feature of this conference is that it combines the scholars, academicians, and practitioners, the UN members, diplomats, all the people working on climate change and climate change displacement issues assembled here. Yeah. So though the main focus of the conference was on disappearing islands, but there were some discussion on Bangladesh also. That's why I also express my thankful gratitude to the organizers and the presenters. And though we are not completely going to disappear, but we are one of the most vulnerable countries in terms of number of population, at least number of population of displacement, population of displacement. Actually, we discussed whether there should be an international convention on climate change displacement or not. So far I understood the presenters have identified 3 obstacles on the way to international convention on displacement. First of all, the problem of multi-causality. It is not very easy to distinguish the people who displace due to climate change reasons, because when people decide to migrate, it's dependent on various factors, other socio-economic, political factors. It is interrelated. And second thing, there are various kinds of definitions: climate change migrant, environmental displacement, climate migration, eco-migration. There are various definitions in the migration literature. And thirdly, the causation issue, whether the developed countries are responsible for this vulnerability or not. So my understanding is whatever be the causation, whatever be the reason of displacement, people are suffering in the island states and in Bangladesh and in other affected countries. So we should focus on this vulnerability of the people, and we should discuss climate change on the human face of the issue actually. And last 2 decades actually there was discussion on scientific and economic analysis of climate change, and very recently discussion started on human face of the issue and human rights. It is discussed from the human rights perspective. That's, I think, good start. And I heard here that next month maybe there is discussion in Security Council on climate change and security issue. That's, I think, good progress going on. And this conference itself reflection that now climate change is discussed on human rights issue. So I am thankful to all the participants and presenters, and we should work together. That's my appeal to all the people, all the participants here, to mitigate the vulnerability of the displaced people. And if you go to the island countries and Bangladesh, you will see the vulnerability of the people. If you visit already, it's started. That's why I said in my earlier response that it's not no more prediction, it's reality. If you visit Bangladesh, you will see the vulnerability of the people who displaced due to salinity intrusion in the coastal areas. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Saif Zamir from NYU. First, thank to everybody that was involved in preparing and producing this event. If we, from my point of view, if we take one thing from all the 3 days that we spent here together, is that we found out that we have a tremendous problem on our hand. But from my experience, I know that dealing in the international communities with problems is very, very slow, like a turtle. So if we can succeed in moving the problem to one sphere up to create a crisis, you'll see how they'll deal with it like rabbits. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, yes. Ambassador.
Thank you, Professor Gerard. My name is Decima Williams. I come from Grenada, and I share responsibility for AOSIS with 2 colleagues who have already spoken, Ambassador Mueller, who represents the PSIDS on the Bureau, and Ambassador Lima, who represents the AIMS. And so AOSIS has had its voice put into this assessment already for the afternoon, and of course into the conference. What is left for me to do is to first of all say how proud AOSIS is of the initiative taken by Marshall Islands to host this conference and to take the discussion to the level that it has taken it. Every measure, well, let me say that every member state has the responsibility to act to strengthen its own national interests, but in the context of AOSIS to also strengthen the organization. And I think this has been a definitive input, an addition to the work of AOSIS. Every measure that we take to save ourselves is an act of responsibility, and it is encouraging to see when we do that. I want to thank, on behalf of AOSIS, the non-AOSIS members who have participated and supported Marshall Islands. The various embassies, various missions here, Finland, Australia, I don't want to get in trouble by not naming everybody, but a large number who have been here, Hungary, many, many others. One of the achievements of the conference, it's clear, is to reinforce the call of urgency and adequacy that we have been making, that there isn't enough of an adequate or an urgent response to the climate change dilemma. And I think this conference helps to strengthen that call, particularly in the field of mitigation, as well as we have ventured now into the field of migration and litigation. I concur with what has been said by our colleague from Belize, that there are a large number of initiatives out there, but they are disarticulated. For example, as you mentioned, in UNESCO, there is an initiative on ethics and climate change for small islands. In the civil society in Europe, there's a 2-year exhibition in 2 of the leading museums of the world on the various elements of island existence. But perhaps one of the things we can do, Professor, since you're asking for ideas, is to find the next opportunity when we can pull together all of the various initiatives so that we could deliver a bit of a big bang in 2011. And you can find a willing partner in AOSIS for this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to join my Minister John Sell from the Marshall Islands and our Ambassador Philip Muller, and also my colleague Senator and Member of Parliament Fred Muller. I'm Dennis Momotaro. I think we have much to thank you, Professor Michael Gerard, and also Columbia University, and also all those who helped in this conference. I learned so much from this conference, and when I look back, I think, our islands are small islands, and probably they might not be very important to the whole world, but we are unique. Losing our islands will mean losing something very beautiful that God has created. And as a member of Parliament back home, I think I'll try to do all my best and all my ability so that I can help to preserve our island. But of course, we are small. We need the help of the international community. And we are the one who are making the decisions now, and we are the one who can make changes. And it's our responsibility. I looked at man has sent people to the moon and back. It's a very difficult task. Why can't we also be first to climate change? I think it's our responsibility, and I see that this conference has contributed so much, and I thank all on behalf of Marshall Islands and also the people that we represent, and we thank also the sponsors. Thank you very much, and God bless all. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Julie Larocque. I'm from University of Quebec in Montreal. I'm studying climate migration at the master's level, more on a sociological perspective, and my subject was in West Africa, so about desertification, and I just wanted to say that if the issue was going to be addressed at the UN, we must not forget to include them, and it can make also bigger statement, also to include the West African countries who have desertification issues, and also not to forget gender differentiation, because women are the most vulnerable, but they're not always able to move. And so that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ambassador Moses.
Thank you. Honorable Minister, ambassadors, I would just like to thank the government of the Marshall Islands for sharing your national vision on survival due to the existential threat that climate change poses on your people and your nation. In terms of the Security Council debate that will be convened in July, I would just like to say that this initiative was born out of a Pacific Leaders mandate from Niue 3 years ago, and the Pacific ambassadors took this forward at the United Nations. It's taken us a few years to get this issue before the Security Council, but we have done it thanks to a mandate that we received from our leaders. And while we are sharing ideas on the way forward, Honorable Minister, may I just respectfully request that what you have achieved today, what your government has achieved today, with the support of Columbia University, that it be articulated to our leaders once again during the forum meeting and related conferences. Because, you know, your representatives at the United Nations are your foot soldiers. And we take our instructions and our mandate from you. And survival and our continued existence is paramount to everything else. And so, Minister, I would just like to humbly ask that what you have achieved today is translated and shared with your colleagues in the Pacific, so we can really move forward this initiative that you have started 3 days ago. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate and thank you, Chair, for the very good conference, and also for our Ambassador Muller, for bringing us the delegation from the RMI. But before I proceed, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Daisy Alec Momotaro, and I'm the Executive Director for the Umbrella Women's NGO group in the Marshall Islands. Women in the Marshall Islands represent 49.5% of the population in the RMI, and out of the 49.5%, the majority generate their income from making handicrafts. Some of them I brought them and we were selling them outside. When I was sitting here the last 2 days and listening to all the sharing and also the presentation, it really scared me, because I was thinking about our women. If we will be relocated to another place, how can they make handicrafts? The raw materials we make the handicrafts from, I don't see the tree here, like even in Hawaii, it's closer like a tropical islands. We have this two particular tree, coconut and the pandanus tree, and they're different kind of tree. And thinking about them, I don't see how they can survive living in another place different from our own islands. At the same time, majority of these women, they only speak our language. So I was thinking here and want to share my thoughts. So if, like, the bigger countries, who is responsible for the climate change, as my husband mentioned, if you can send people to the moon, you can find ways to, so we can continue to have our islands. Thank you.
I'm Carolina Claro with the University of São Paulo. Well, I'm very honored and grateful to participate in such an important event about imminent and important issues that affect so many people throughout the world. These 3 days have been a very fruitful exchange of ideas and much more than a political, academic, and legal discussion. I believe we all have a mission to keep working in our fields of expertise to fulfill the goals posed in this very conference through all possible channels. And it's my belief that we should not only publish articles and studies on the subjects we've discussed here, but we should mostly take concrete measures to help solve these urgent matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I turn it back to Ambassador Mueller for closing remarks, let me say that you're all welcome to we'll continue these discussions upstairs in the closing reception. And I want to say how deeply honored Columbia University is to have been asked by the Republic of the Marshall Islands to undertake this effort, and how deeply honored we are that all of you came, many of you great distances, to come to this conference to spend all this time with us. And we very much look forward to continuing this dialogue, these very important efforts in the years to come. Ambassador?
I thought I was finished, but thank you for the opportunity once more time. And I think just one last comment. I think it's important that we also express our appreciation and a big thank you to the folks who help us bring everybody together and to host this conference. Special thanks to the government of Australia. They provided help to get this thing, the conference going. The Earth Institute of Columbia University, they also did their part. The Green, what's called it? The Global Institute of South Korea also help us out. The government of Israel also help us out. And of course the World Bank. I want to, on all of our behalf, say thank you so much for coming forward and being so generous with the help. I should also add that when our call went out to look for sponsors, there were many, many more countries and organizations who had come forward, but I had to say, enough, reserve it for our next conference or our next step. So please be assured that if there is a decision or a plan to take more action, I think we can find more friends who are willing to come forward. So thank you again to all the sponsors, and thank you all for coming. I think this was a very fruitful event. So have a safe trip back home and enjoy the reception, 4 o'clock. Huh?
Yes.
Thank you. I think it's not 4 o'clock, but the reception can